The cafe's window had never felt so much like a barrier, until Chen watched Owen Garrett slide into the booth across from her with that disarming smile that made her heart stutter in ways she refused to acknowledge. They had been dancing around each other for 3 months now, ever since she had spilled coffee on his expensive suit at this very establishment, and he had laughed instead of getting angry like most people would have. What started as an apology had turned into weekly coffee meetings that felt suspiciously like dates neither of them had the courage to name. Owen ran a hand through his dark hair, and Clara noticed the way his jaw tensed slightly as he cleared his throat. He had something to say, and she already knew she wouldn't like it. "I need to tell you something," he said, his green eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her stomach flip. "My company is opening a new division in Chicago." Clara's fingers tightened around her mug. "That's great. Congratulations. I'm heading it up. They want me there by the end of next month." The words hung in the air between them like a guillotine waiting to drop. Clara felt her chest constrict. They weren't even officially together, and yet the thought of him leaving Portland felt like losing something precious she had only just begun to understand she wanted. "Chicago," she repeated, her voice carefully neutral. She was a graphic designer at a small firm downtown. Her life was here, her friends, her tiny apartment that she loved despite its temperamental heating. "That's quite a move. Come with me," Clara blinked. "What?" Owen leaned forward, and she could smell his cologne, something woody and warm that she had come to associate with safety and possibility. "Come to Chicago, with me. I know we haven't labeled whatever this is, but Clara, I think about you constantly. Every meeting, every decision, every moment, you're there in my head. I want to see where this goes." Her heart hammered against her ribs. Yes, every cell in her body screamed. "Yes, I'll follow you anywhere because these 3 months have been the best of my life and I'm terrified of what it means." But Clara had learned hard lessons about following her heart without protecting it first. "Owen, I can't do long distance," she said, the words coming out firmer than she felt. "I've tried it before. It doesn't work. People drift apart, they grow resentful, they find someone closer who's actually there when they need them. I'm not built for loving someone through a screen. Then come with me. I have a job here, a life. I can't just uproot everything for someone I've known for 3 months, no matter how much She stopped herself before she said too much. "It's not realistic." Owen's expression shifted, something vulnerable crossing his features before he schooled them back into control. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you go to Chicago, this ends here, before it really begins. Better that than dragging out something that's doomed to fail. You don't know it would fail. I don't know it would succeed either." Clara forced herself to hold his gaze even though everything in her wanted to look away from the hurt she saw there. "I like you, Owen. I really like you, but I'm not going to set myself up for heartbreak over something that hasn't even started yet." He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming once against the table before he stilled them. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured. "What if I told you I'm a millionaire, Clara? That I could fly you out whenever you wanted, that money would never be an object in making this work?" Clara felt her eyebrows rise. She had known Owen worked for some pharmaceutical research company, something about developing new treatment protocols, but he drove a modest car and wore nice but not ostentatious clothes. "Are you?" "Yes. My family built Garrett Pharmaceuticals. I'm not just heading up the Chicago division. I own the company. I've been trying to tell you for weeks, but it never seemed like the right time. And then I started to like that you didn't treat me differently, that you argued with me about coffee preferences and made fun of my terrible taste in podcasts without any awareness of who I was supposed to be." Clara sat back, processing this information. It should have changed things, but somehow it made her position feel more solid. That's great for you, Owen. Really. But money doesn't fix the fundamental problem. You'll still be in Chicago building your empire. I'll still be here trying to have a relationship with someone who isn't present. Flying out for weekends sounds romantic until it's been 6 months, and we've spent more time in airports than actually together. Until one of us gets tired or meets someone else, or just forgets why we were trying so hard in the first place. I wouldn't forget. You say that now. Owen reached across the table and caught her hand before she could pull away. His palm was warm, calloused in a way that surprised her, as though he worked with his hands despite his corporate position. Give me a chance to prove you wrong. Clara wanted to. God, she wanted to so badly. But she had watched her best friend, Sarah, waste 2 years on a long-distance relationship that ended in tears and betrayal. Had felt the sting herself in college when the boy she loved found comfort in someone who was actually there for him. Distance didn't make the heart grow fonder. It made the heart grow lonely. I can't, she whispered, pulling her hand back. I'm sorry, Owen. I hope Chicago is everything you want it to be. She left the cafe before he could say anything else, before she could change her mind, before the tears burning behind her eyes could fall where he could see them. The next 4 weeks passed in a blur of gray. Clara threw herself into work, taking on extra projects, staying late at the office until her boss Marcus told her to go home and get some sleep. She declined girls' nights with Sarah and her other friends, claiming deadlines that were real but not as pressing as she made them sound. Her apartment felt too quiet, too empty, echoing with conversations she had imagined having with Owen about everything and nothing. He texted her twice, once to say he was leaving next week and wanted to see her before he went, once to say goodbye when she didn't respond to the first message. She deleted both without answering, even though her fingers hovered over the keyboard for 20 minutes each time, typing and deleting responses that ranged from cold to desperate. Sarah cornered her at a mutual friend's birthday party 2 months after Owen left. You look terrible, Sarah said bluntly, handing Clara a drink she didn't want. Thanks. You look great too. I'm serious, Clara. You've been miserable since Owen left. Why didn't you at least try to make it work? Because long distance doesn't work, Clara said automatically. You of all people should understand that, Sarah winced. My situation was different. Marcus was a cheating bastard who would have betrayed me whether we lived in the same city or not. Owen isn't Marcus. How do you know? Because I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at him. And I saw the way he looked at you at that charity gala we went to, like you were the only person in the room worth seeing. Clara took a sip of her drink to avoid responding. She remembered that gala, a fundraiser for children's hospitals that Sarah had dragged her to. Owen had been there, and they had spent the entire evening in a corner talking about everything from their childhoods to their dreams, oblivious to the wealth and prestige surrounding them. He had told her about losing his mother to cancer when he was 15, and how it had driven him to pour everything into pharmaceutical research, to finding better treatments, better outcomes. She had told him about her father leaving when she was 8, and how it had made her determined to build a life she couldn't lose, something stable and contained and safe. Maybe that was the real problem. Owen made her feel unsafe, like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful, and she had spent so long building walls that she didn't know how to let them down. It doesn't matter now, Clara said. He's in Chicago. I'm here. That's the end of it. But it wasn't the end. 3 months after Owen left, Clara received a package at her office. Inside was a first edition of her favorite novel, one she had mentioned offhand during one of their coffee meetings, something she hadn't expected him to remember. The note was simple. Saw this and thought of you. Hope you're well. Owen. She ran her fingers over the cover, feeling tears prick her eyes. She should donate it, refuse it, send it back. Instead, she took it home and placed it on her nightshelf where she could see it every morning. A month later, another package arrived. This one contained a small watercolor painting of the Portland skyline at sunset, the colors rich and vibrant. The note read, "A piece of home for you. I miss our conversations. Owen," Clara called Sarah that night. "He's sending me things," she said without preamble when Sarah answered. "What kind of things? Thoughtful things, beautiful things, things that show he's been paying attention to every word I've ever said to him. And this is a problem because it makes it harder." "Harder to what?" "Pretend you don't have feelings for him." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "I told him I couldn't do long distance, that it wouldn't work. If I reach out now, I'm admitting I was wrong." "Heaven forbid," Sarah said dryly. "Clara, pride is a terrible reason to be miserable. If you miss him, tell him. What if it doesn't work out? What if it does?" That night, Clara composed and deleted 17 different text messages to Owen. She finally settled on something simple. "Thank you for the painting. It's beautiful. I miss our conversations, too." His response came within minutes. "Can I call you?" Her phone rang before she could answer, and Clara's hand shook slightly as she accepted the call. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi." Owen's voice was warm and familiar, and Clara felt something in her chest loosen just from hearing it. "How are you?" "Honestly, not great. Work is fine, my friends are good, but I feel like I'm going through the motions of a life I'm not actually living." "I know what you mean. Chicago is everything I thought I wanted professionally. The division is exceeding projections. We have 3 new treatments and trials. I'm building something important. But I come home to an empty apartment every night and think about what you might say about my day. How you would laugh at the ridiculous meetings I sit through. How you would call me out when I'm being too serious." "I'm sorry I didn't give us a chance," Clara said, the words rushing out before she could stop them. "I was scared. I'm still scared, but I think I was more scared of the wrong things." "What do you mean?" "I was so focused on the distance being the thing that would break us that I didn't consider that not trying at all was the thing that would break me. These past 5 months have been miserable, Owen. And not because you're far away, but because you're not in my life at all." She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could almost picture him processing her words with that thoughtful expression he got when he was really listening. "So what do we do about it?" he asked finally. "I don't know. I still can't just pick up my life and move to Chicago. My job, my lease, everything is here. But I want to try. If you still want to." "Clara, I've wanted to try since the moment you spilled coffee on me and looked so horrified I thought you might cry. I've been waiting 5 months hoping you would change your mind." "That's a long time to wait for someone. You're worth waiting for." Something warm bloomed in Clara's chest, something that felt suspiciously like hope. "We should probably set some ground rules, figure out how to make this actually work instead of just hoping it will." "Practical as always," Owen said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Okay, I'll start. I can come back to Portland at least 1 weekend a month, maybe more depending on how things are going here. And I want to fly you out here whenever you can get away. Not because I'm trying to buy your affection or show off, but because I want you to see my life here, to be part of it even from a distance." "I can probably visit once a month too," Clara said, her mind already calculating vacation days and project deadlines. "And we should video call regularly. Not just texts. I need to see your face, hear your voice." "Every night," Owen said immediately. "Even if it's just for 10 minutes, I want to know about your day, the good and the bad and the boring. Every night might be a lot. Try me." They talked for 3 hours that night, making up for months of silence. Clara told him about the rebranding project she was leading at work, how terrified and excited she was to have that much responsibility. Owen told her about the challenges of managing a team twice the size of anything he had worked with before, how he sometimes felt like an imposter playing at being a businessman when what he really cared about was the science. When they finally said goodnight, Clara felt lighter than she had in months. True to his word, Owen called the next night, and the night after that. They settled into a routine of evening conversations that stretched long past when they both should have been sleeping. Clara found herself saving up stories from her day to share with him, noticing small details she would have otherwise missed because she wanted to paint him a picture of her world. 2 weeks after their first phone call, Owen flew back to Portland for the weekend. Clara met him at the airport, and when she saw him walking through the arrival gate, her heart stuttered exactly the way it had that first day in the cafe. He looked tired, his suit slightly rumpled from travel, but his face lit up when he spotted her. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy. "Hi." He closed the distance between them and pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home. Clara buried her face in his chest and breathed him in, that woody cologne mixing with something uniquely him. "I've missed you. I've missed you too." He pulled back just enough to look at her, one hand coming up to cup her face. "Can I kiss you? We never actually got around to that before I left," Clara laughed, feeling some of her nervousness dissolve. "Yes, please." His lips were soft against hers, the kiss gentle and questioning at first before deepening into something that made Clara's knees weak. She gripped his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him, and thought that maybe Sarah had been right. Maybe some things were worth the risk. They spent the weekend exploring Portland like tourists, visiting all the places they had talked about but never gone to during those 3 months of not quite dating. Owen held her hand as they walked through the Japanese garden, listened intently as she explained the design principles she loved in the architecture downtown, and made her laugh so hard at Powell's books that people stared. On Sunday evening, as they sat on her apartment couch eating takeout from the Thai place they both loved, Clara felt the melancholy of his impending departure settling over her. "This is the hard part," she said quietly, "knowing you're leaving again." Owen set down his food and turned to face her fully. "It is, but Clara, we have so many more weekends ahead of us, so many more conversations and visits and moments. This isn't goodbye, it's just see you soon." "See you soon," she repeated, trying the words on for size. They felt better than goodbye. "I'll be back in 3 weeks, and you're coming to Chicago the month after that. Remember?" She had agreed to visit him in Chicago over a long weekend, nervous about seeing his life there but wanting to be brave enough to try. "I remember." "We're going to make this work," Owen said with such conviction that Clara almost believed him completely. "I know you have doubts, I know you're scared, but I'm not going anywhere, neither are you. We're just in different cities for now, that's all it is." The months that followed developed their own rhythm. Owen came to Portland twice a month when he could, sometimes just for a Saturday night if that was all his schedule allowed. Clara visited Chicago once a month, gradually getting to know his city the way he knew hers. She met his team at work, impressive people doing important research, who welcomed her warmly once they realized she wasn't intimidated by Owen's wealth or position. She saw his apartment, a spacious loft in a converted warehouse that had clearly been decorated by a professional but somehow still felt empty. "It doesn't feel like home," Owen admitted when she commented on it during her second visit. "Home is still Portland. Or more accurately, home is wherever you are." "That's incredibly cheesy," Clara said, but she was smiling. "You love it, I might." Their nightly phone calls became sacred. Clara would curl up in bed with her laptop, and they would talk about everything and nothing until one of them fell asleep. Sometimes, they would just keep the call connected while they worked on separate projects, comfortable in the companionship even across the distance. Owen attended her work presentations via video call when he couldn't be there in person. Always her first text when something good happened, or when she needed someone to vent to about a difficult client. 6 months into their official relationship, Clara's company announced they were downsizing. Her position was safe, but 3 of her colleagues were laid off, and the atmosphere in the office became tense and uncertain. Clara threw herself into proving her value, working late nights and weekends, taking on projects that pushed her skills to their limits. "You sound exhausted," Owen said one night during their call. Clara was at her desk at 9 p.m., eyes burning from staring at her screen. "I'm fine. Just need to finish this logo revision." "Clara, you've been working 14-hour days for 2 weeks. You need to rest." "I need to keep my job." "Your job isn't at risk. Marcus told you that. Things change quickly. I need to be indispensable." Owen was quiet for a moment. "Is this about the job or is this about control?" Clara's hands stilled on her keyboard. "What? You do this when you're anxious. You try to control everything you can because you're afraid of losing things. I've seen you do it with us too, planning every visit down to the minute, panicking when flights get delayed or plans change. That's not fair." "Maybe not. But is it true?" Clara closed her laptop and rubbed her eyes. "Maybe. I don't know. I just feel like if I can work hard enough, plan well enough, be good enough, then nothing bad will happen. I won't lose what I have." "Come to Chicago next weekend," Owen said gently. "Take a long weekend. Let me take care of you for a few days." "I can't. I have 3 deadlines and a client meeting on Monday." "Clara." "Owen, I appreciate the concern, but I know what I can handle." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're running yourself into the ground." "Maybe if you were actually here, you would understand the pressure I'm under," Clara snapped, immediately regretting the words. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "That's not fair," Owen said quietly. "I'm here as much as I can be. And you know if you wanted to move to Chicago, I would help you find a job here in a heartbeat. But you're the one who won't consider it. Because my life is in Portland." "Is it? Or is Portland just the familiar thing, the safe thing, the thing you can control?" "Not everyone runs away to a different city when things get hard, Owen. And not everyone stays somewhere just because it's familiar, even when they are miserable." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Are you saying I should move to Chicago?" "I'm saying I want you to be happy. And right now, you don't seem happy. You seem stressed and exhausted and like you're holding on to things that might not be serving you anymore." "My career matters to me. I know it does. And I admire that about you, but I also think you're capable of building a career anywhere. You're incredibly talented, Clara. Companies would be lucky to have you." "I can't have this conversation right now," Clara said, her voice tight. "I need to finish this project." "Okay." Owen sounded defeated. "I'll talk to you tomorrow." "Yeah, tomorrow." But Clara didn't answer when he called the next night, or the night after. She told herself she was just busy, that she needed space to think, that she was protecting herself from expectations she couldn't meet. But the truth was, Owen's words had hit too close to home, had exposed fears she didn't want to examine. On the 3rd day, Sarah showed up at her apartment unannounced. "Owen called me," she said, pushing past Clara into the living room. "He's worried about you. I'm worried about you. Talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about. We had a fight, couples fight. This is more than a fight. You're shutting him out, again, just like you did before he left for Chicago. He doesn't understand what I'm dealing with. Because you won't let him understand. You won't let him help. You won't let him be a partner because you're so determined to handle everything alone." Clara sank onto her couch, suddenly exhausted. What if he's right? What if I'm only staying in Portland because it's familiar, because it's what I know? Would that be so terrible? To admit you might want something different. I told him I couldn't do long distance. That was my boundary, my line. And he's in Chicago anyway, so I stayed here to prove I could make it work, that I wasn't just another person who couldn't handle the distance. Clara, you're not proving anything to anyone but yourself, and I think you're miserable doing it. Sarah sat beside her and took her hand. What do you actually want? Not what you think you should want, not what seems practical or safe. What does your heart want? Clara thought about it, really thought about it for the first time in months. She thought about her apartment that felt empty without Owen's presence. Her job that she was good at but not passionate about. Her city that she loved but that didn't feel like enough anymore. I want to be with Owen, she whispered. Not just on weekends and phone calls. I want to wake up next to him. I want to argue about what to have for dinner and fall asleep watching movies together. I want the boring, everyday stuff, not just the highlights. Then tell him that. But I was so adamant that I couldn't do long distance, that I wouldn't move. How do I just change my mind now? You say, I was wrong, I was scared. I want to try something different. Sarah squeezed her hand. People are allowed to change their minds, Clara. Especially when the alternative is being miserable. Clara picked up her phone with shaking hands and called Owen. He answered on the first ring. Clara. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I'm sorry for shutting you out, for not answering your calls, for being too stubborn to admit when I'm wrong. You don't have to apologize for being scared. But I do have to apologize for taking it out on you. You were right. I've been trying to control everything because I'm terrified of losing what I have. But in doing that, I'm not actually living. I'm just existing. What are you saying? Clara took a deep breath. I'm saying I want to look at jobs in Chicago. I'm not promising anything and I'm terrified, but I think I need to at least explore the possibility. Because this half-life we're living isn't working for me anymore. I miss you too much. I want more than phone calls and visits. She could hear Owen's sharp intake of breath. You're serious. Completely serious. Terrified but serious. I'll help however I can. I have connections at firms there, I can make introductions, but Clara, I want you to know that if you do this, it has to be because it's what you want. Not because you think it's what I want or what you should do. If you move here and you're miserable, that won't fix anything. I know. But I think I've been so focused on what I might lose that I haven't let myself consider what I might gain, and I'm tired of living that way. When can I see you? I can fly out this weekend. Actually, I was thinking I could come there. I should probably start getting to know the city better, and maybe start talking to some companies. I'll make a list of places I think you would love. Firms that do innovative work that would appreciate your talent. Owen? Yeah. Thank you for being patient with me, for not giving up. I told you I would wait for you. I meant it. 3 weeks later, Clara flew to Chicago with her portfolio and a list of 7 design firms she wanted to talk to. Owen had offered to make introductions, but she had asked him not to, wanting to do this on her own merits rather than as the girlfriend of Owen Garrett. 4 of the firms invited her in for interviews. The third interview was with a mid-size agency called Meridian Design that specialized in healthcare branding. The moment Clara walked into their office, she felt something click into place. The space was creative and collaborative, with designers working in open areas and private spaces for focused work. The portfolio on the walls was impressive, socially conscious, exactly the kind of work she had always wanted to do. The interview itself was more like a conversation. The creative director, a woman named Jennifer with silver hair and sharp eyes, asked Clara about her process, her influences, what drove her to design. Clara found herself talking about her father leaving, about building something beautiful from chaos, about wanting to create brands that meant something. "Your work is excellent," Jennifer said at the end. "Technical skill combined with emotional intelligence. That's rare. We're looking for a senior designer to lead our non-profit division. The pay is competitive, the work is meaningful, and I think you would thrive here." They offered her the position 3 days later. Clara stared at the email for an hour before calling Owen. "They offered me the job," she said when he answered. "That's incredible. Congratulations. I'm going to take it." Yeah, I'm terrified, but I'm going to take it. And I'm going to move to Chicago for real this time." Owen was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I love you, Clara. I know we haven't said that yet, but I do. I've loved you since you spilled coffee on me and looked at me like I was a person instead of a bank account. And I'll love you whether you're in Portland or Chicago or anywhere else." Clara felt tears stream down her face. "I love you too. I've loved you for months, maybe from the very beginning. I was just too scared to admit it. When can you start? They want me in 6 weeks. I need to give notice, pack up my apartment, say goodbye to Portland. I'll help you move. Whatever you need." The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of logistics and emotions. Clara gave notice at her firm, and Marcus threw her a going-away party that made her cry. Sarah helped her pack, alternating between excitement for Clara's new adventure and sadness at losing her best friend to another city. "Chicago isn't that far," Clara said, wrapping dishes in newspaper. "You can visit all the time." "I will. And you better visit here too. Just because you're following some millionaire to the Midwest doesn't mean you get to forget about me." Following him was what I was afraid of, but this doesn't feel like following. It feels like choosing. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Sarah taped up a box and marked it kitchen in permanent marker. "I'm proud of you, you know, for being brave enough to take a risk on love." Owen flew to Portland the week before her move to help. Together, they packed up her life into boxes, sorted through belongings to donate or sell, said goodbye to the apartment that had been her sanctuary. On her last night in Portland, they walked through the city together, visiting all their favorite places one more time. "I'm going to miss this," Clara said as they stood in the Japanese garden at dusk, the same place they had walked during his first visit back. "Me too. But we're not losing Portland. It'll still be here whenever we want to visit. We're just adding Chicago to our story." "When did you get so wise?" "I think you bring it out in me." The move itself was chaotic but less overwhelming than Clara had feared. Owen's friends helped unload the truck, and suddenly her belongings were mixing with his in the loft that would now be their shared space. Clara felt a moment of panic as she looked around at the mixture of their lives, 2 separate existences merging into one. "We can rearrange anything you want," Owen said, reading her expression. "This is your home too now. I want you to feel comfortable." "I am comfortable. I'm just adjusting." "Take all the time you need." Clara started her new job the following Monday, and from the first day, she knew she had made the right choice. The work was challenging and meaningful, the team was talented and supportive, and Jennifer turned out to be an excellent mentor. She threw herself into the non-profit division, rebranding 3 organizations in her first 6 months and bringing in 2 major new clients. Living with Owen was an adjustment, but a sweet one. They learned each other's routines and quirks, negotiated who would cook and who would clean, figured out how to share space while still giving each other room to breathe. Clara loved the small intimacies of daily life together, making coffee in the morning while Owen read the news, cooking dinner together while they talked about their days, falling asleep tangled together in their bed. 8 months after Clara moved to Chicago, Owen's company achieved a major breakthrough. One of their new cancer treatments completed Phase 3 trials with remarkable success, and the FDA fast-tracked it for approval. Owen came home that night looking shell-shocked. "We did it," he said, pulling Clara into his arms. "This treatment could save thousands of lives. My mother's life if it had existed when she was sick." Clara held him as he cried, something she had never seen him do before. She understood that this was more than professional success for him. This was redemption purpose, the reason he had poured everything into his company. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered into his hair. "Your mother would be so proud." "None of it means anything if I can't share it with you," Owen said, pulling back to look at her. "You know that, right? All the money, the success, the recognition, it's empty without you. You have me. I'm not going anywhere." "Actually, I was hoping we could go somewhere, together." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Mysterious, I like it." Owen took her hand and led her to the couch, then pulled a small box from his pocket. Clara's heart started hammering as he dropped to one knee. "I know we said we would take things slow," Owen said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I know you were scared of distance and change and all the things that can go wrong. But Clara, you taught me that sometimes the things we're most afraid of are the things that make us strongest. You were right to be cautious about long distance. It was hard. But it forced us to really communicate, to be intentional about our relationship, to choose each other every single day across those miles. And now that we're finally in the same city, I don't want to waste another moment. Will you marry me?" Clara looked at the ring, a simple but beautiful solitaire that caught the light, then at Owen's face, open and hopeful and so full of love it made her chest ache. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, and Clara thought about how far they had come from that first conversation in the cafe when she had been so certain that distance would destroy them. She had been wrong about so many things. Distance hadn't destroyed them. It had refined them, tested them, proved that what they had was strong enough to survive anything. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony that split the difference between Portland and Chicago. Sarah was Clara's maid of honor, and Owen's best friend from graduate school stood up with him. Clara wore a simple dress and carried wildflowers, and when Owen looked at her walking down the aisle, she saw everything she had been afraid to hope for reflected in his eyes. The reception was in a garden, intimate and warm, filled with the people who mattered most to them. Marcus flew in from Portland and got slightly drunk, telling embarrassing stories about Clara's early days at the firm. Jennifer gave a toast about taking risks that made Clara cry. Owen's father, a quiet man who had mostly stayed in the background of Owen's life since his mother's death, pulled Clara aside. "Thank you for making my son happy," he said gruffly. "He's been different since he met you, lighter, more himself." "He makes me happy too," Clara said. "He taught me how to be brave." Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Clara continued to thrive at Meridian, eventually becoming creative director of her division. Owen's company expanded, opening facilities in 3 more cities, but he remained based in Chicago, unwilling to sacrifice the life they had built together for professional advancement. They bought a house in a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and parks, arguing cheerfully about paint colors and furniture. 2 years after their wedding, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Owen over breakfast on a Saturday morning, watching his face transform from confusion to understanding to pure joy in the span of seconds. "We're having a baby," he said, his voice awed. "We're having a baby." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing, and Clara thought about how different this was from the life she had imagined for herself all those years ago. How much richer, how much fuller, how much better than anything she could have planned. Their daughter was born on a snowy day in December, 7 pounds and perfect. They named her Margaret after Owen's mother, with the middle name Rose after Clara's grandmother. Owen cried when he held her for the first time, and Clara took a photo of them together, her husband and her daughter, the family she had been too afraid to dream of. Sarah visited 2 weeks after Margaret was born, bringing food and offering to help in whatever way she could. She held the baby while Clara showered and insisted Owen get some sleep, taking charge with the efficiency of a best friend who knew exactly what was needed. "You were right," Clara said when they were alone, Margaret sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms. "About taking the risk. About Chicago. About all of it." "I'm always right," Sarah said with a grin, "but I'm glad you figured it out. I was so sure that distance would break us, that it was the worst possible thing for a relationship. Sometimes the obstacles we think will destroy us end up making us stronger." The distance forced you and Owen to really build a foundation before you had the comfort of daily proximity. You had to learn to communicate, to trust, to be vulnerable in ways you might not have if you had just fallen into an easy local relationship. Clara thought about that as she watched her best friend hold her daughter. Sarah was right. The distance had been a gift in its own way. It had stripped away all the superficial things and forced them to figure out if what they had was real. And it was. It had been real from the very beginning, from that first coffee spill, that first conversation, that first moment when their eyes met, and something clicked into place. Margaret grew into a bright, curious toddler who had Owen's green eyes and Clara's stubborn determination. Clara went back to work part-time, then full-time, finding balance between motherhood and career with Owen's full support. He took paternity leave when Margaret was born, and continued to share parenting duties equally, never falling into the trap of treating childcare as Clara's primary responsibility. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Clara with a trip back to Portland. They left Margaret with Owen's father, who had become a devoted grandfather, and flew west together. "Where are we going?" Clara asked as Owen drove their rental car through familiar streets. "You'll see." He pulled up in front of the cafe where they had first met, where Clara had spilled coffee on him, where he had asked her to follow him to Chicago, and she had said no. "Why are we here?" "Because this is where it all started," Owen said, taking her hand. "I wanted to remind you of how far we've come." They went inside and ordered coffee, sitting in the same booth where Owen had told her about Chicago, where Clara had been so certain that distance was an insurmountable obstacle. The cafe had changed slightly, new artwork on the walls, a different barista behind the counter, but the bones of it were the same. "I was so scared," Clara said, staring at her coffee. "That day when you told me you were leaving. I was terrified of losing you, but even more terrified of trying and failing. I know, but you were brave enough to try anyway, eventually. It took me 5 miserable months, but yes, those 5 months were important too. They taught us what it felt like to live without each other. Made us appreciate what we have." Clara reached across the table and took his hand, the same gesture he had made all those years ago when he had asked her to give them a chance. "I love our life, our home, our daughter, our everything, and I'm so grateful I was brave enough to choose you." "I'm grateful you chose yourself," Owen said. "That's what you really did, you know. You chose to stop being afraid, to stop letting fear dictate your decisions. I just happened to benefit from that choice." They walked through Portland for hours, revisiting old haunts and making new memories. Clara realized that the city felt different now, like visiting a beloved friend rather than mourning a lost home. Chicago was home now, fully and completely, not because of the city itself, but because of the life she had built there with Owen. 7 years after moving to Chicago, Clara's firm was approached by a major healthcare conglomerate for a massive rebranding project. When she walked into the initial meeting and realized the conglomerate was partnering with Garrett Pharmaceuticals, she had to suppress a laugh. Owen was already in the conference room when she arrived, and their eyes met across the table with shared amusement. "Mr. Garrett," Clara said formally, extending her hand. "Pleasure to see you again." "Mrs. Garrett," Owen replied with equal formality, shaking her hand. "The pleasure is mine." Their colleagues looked confused until someone connected the names. And then there was laughter and good-natured teasing about the conflict of interest. Clara and Owen had worked together before, carefully maintaining professional boundaries, and they did so again now. But it was special, working on a project that combined both their passions, that represented the convergence of their separate but complementary careers. The rebranding was a massive success, winning awards and generating positive press for both companies. At the celebration party, Owen pulled Clara aside. "Remember when you were afraid that your career wouldn't survive in Chicago," he said. "That moving here would mean sacrificing your professional dreams." "I remember. I was wrong about that too." "You weren't wrong to worry. It was a legitimate risk. But you were brave enough to take it anyway, and look at what you've built. You're incredible, Clara." "We're incredible," she corrected. "Everything we've built together." Margaret started kindergarten that fall, and Clara found herself unexpectedly emotional dropping her daughter off on the first day. Owen took the morning off to be there with her, understanding without being told that she needed his support. "She's growing up so fast," Clara said, watching Margaret skip confidently into the classroom without a backward glance. "She is, but that's what they're supposed to do. I know, it's just bittersweet." Owen put his arm around her shoulders. "We're doing a good job, you know. She's confident and kind and brave, like her mother, and smart and thoughtful like her father." They stood there for a few moments, watching their daughter through the classroom window before heading back to their respective offices. Clara spent the day working on a new pitch, but part of her mind was on Margaret, hoping she was making friends, hoping she was happy. When they picked her up that afternoon, Margaret was full of stories about her day, talking a mile a minute about the kids she had met and the games they had played. Clara caught Owen's eye over their daughter's head and saw her own relief reflected there. That night, after Margaret was in bed, Clara and Owen sat on their back porch with glasses of wine, looking up at the stars. "You ever think about what would have happened if I had never moved here?" Clara asked. "If I had stuck with my original decision that long distance was impossible?" "Sometimes," Owen admitted. "I think we would have both been fine eventually. We would have moved on, found other people, built different lives. But would we have been happy? Maybe, but not like this." "This is the right life, Clara. I know that with absolute certainty." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other, of building a life together through both easy moments and challenges. "I want to tell you something," Owen said eventually. "Something I've never told you before." Clara turned to look at him, curious. "That first day when you spilled coffee on me, I was having the worst morning. I had just found out about the Chicago opportunity, and I was torn about whether to take it. Part of me wanted to stay in Portland, to keep building the life I had there. And then you crashed into me, all flustered and apologetic and beautiful, and I thought, this is the universe telling me something. I didn't know what at the time. But looking back, I think it was telling me that the best things in life are worth fighting for, even when they're complicated." "That's very poetic for someone who almost ended up wearing my latte." Owen laughed. "I'm serious. You changed everything for me that day, made me realize that success wasn't just about building a company or making scientific breakthroughs. It was about finding someone to share it all with." You changed everything for me too, Clara said softly. Before I met you, I had convinced myself that safety was the same thing as happiness, that if I could just control everything, plan for every contingency, protect myself from risk, then I would be content. But you showed me that real happiness requires vulnerability, requires taking chances on things that might not work out. I'm glad this one did. Me too. 10 years after their first meeting, Clara and Owen renewed their vows in a small ceremony in their backyard. Margaret was 8 now, proudly wearing a flower girl dress and taking her role very seriously. Sarah stood with Clara again, older now but still the same fierce, loyal friend. Owen's father watched with tears in his eyes, grateful to see his son so happy and settled. They spoke their vows in front of family and friends, promising again to love and support each other through whatever life brought their way. But Clara added something new this time. I promise to keep choosing you, she said, looking into Owen's eyes. Every day, across any distance, through any challenge. I promise to be brave enough to take risks for us, for our family, for our love. And I promise to never let fear make my decisions for me again. Owen's vows echoed hers, promising to be her partner in every sense of the word, to support her dreams as fiercely as she supported his, to build a life together that honored both of them. I love you, he said simply. Yesterday, today, and forever. The party afterward was joyful and relaxed, friends and family mingling in the garden they had built together. Clara watched Owen playing with Margaret and some of the other children, and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked her over. This life, this love, this family. She had almost let fear rob her of all of it. That night, long after the guests had gone and Margaret was asleep, Clara and Owen stood in their living room, slow dancing to music only they could hear. Thank you, Clara said quietly. For what? For being patient with me. For not giving up when I pushed you away. For showing me that some things are worth the risk. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Clara. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. They swayed together in the dim light, and Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. The fear, the distance, the challenges, the growth. She had been so certain that physical separation would destroy what they had. But in reality, the distance had been the crucible that proved their love was strong enough to survive anything. 15 years after that first coffee spill, Clara was promoted to executive creative director at Meridian Design. It was a huge professional achievement, one she had worked toward for years. Owen threw her a surprise party to celebrate, inviting colleagues and friends, filling their home with people who loved and admired her. Marcus flew in from Portland, retired now, but still keeping tabs on his former protege. I always knew you were destined for great things, he said, hugging her tightly. But I'm glad you found them in Chicago instead of staying in your comfort zone in Portland. So am I, Clara said, meaning it completely. Margaret was 13 now, already showing signs of her parents' ambition and drive. She wanted to be a doctor like her grandmother would have been, or maybe a scientist like her father. She was brilliant and kind, and Clara saw in her the best parts of both of them. That night, as Clara and Owen got ready for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because she had physically changed so much, but because she carried herself differently now. With confidence, with certainty, with the kind of peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "About how different I am from the woman who told you she couldn't do long distance, how scared I was of everything back then. You're not so different. You're still the same person. You just let yourself be brave. We're still doing long distance in a way," Clara mused. You travel for work, I travel for work. We're not always in the same place at the same time. But we're always together, Owen said. That's what you didn't understand back then. Distance is just physical. What matters is here. He placed his hand over her heart. And here. He touched his own chest. As long as we're connected here, the rest is just logistics. Clara turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Love, gratitude, wonder that she had found this person who understood her so completely. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new adventures and challenges. Owen's company went public, making him wealthier than Clara had ever really processed, but it didn't change who they were or how they lived. They used the money for good, funding scholarships and medical research, supporting causes they believed in. Clara continued to rise in her field, eventually starting her own consultancy that allowed her to take on projects she was passionate about while maintaining flexibility. Margaret graduated high school with honors and chose to attend a medical program on the East Coast. Dropping her off at college was even harder than that first day of kindergarten, but Clara reminded herself that letting go was part of loving well. They had raised their daughter to be independent and brave, to chase her dreams wherever they led. Empty nest, Owen said as they drove away from the campus. How are you feeling? Sad, proud, terrified she'll forget to eat vegetables, all of it at once. She's going to be amazing. Just like her mother. With Margaret away at school, Clara and Owen rediscovered parts of their relationship that had been buried under the demands of parenting. They traveled more, took cooking classes together, went to concerts and museums. They remembered why they had fallen in love in the first place, all those years ago over coffee and conversations. 20 years after moving to Chicago, Clara received an offer to teach design at a prestigious university. She was hesitant at first, worried it would take too much time away from her consultancy. But Owen encouraged her to try it. You love mentoring, he pointed out. And think of all the young designers you could influence. You could be for them what Marcus was for you. So Clara took the position, teaching 2 classes a semester. She loved it immediately, the energy of young creatives, the chance to shape the next generation of designers. Several of her students went on to impressive careers, and they often cited her as an important influence. Owen eventually stepped back from day-to-day operations at Garrett Pharmaceuticals, appointing a CEO to run the company while he focused on research and development. He was happier with less administrative responsibility, able to spend his time on the science he loved. They talked about retiring someday, maybe moving somewhere warm, but neither was quite ready to stop working. Margaret finished medical school and her residency, specializing in oncology just like Clara had secretly hoped she might. She was brilliant and compassionate, everything her grandmother would have been proud of. She fell in love with another doctor, a kind man named Daniel who made her laugh and supported her dreams. Clara and Owen welcomed him into the family with open arms. 25 years after that first meeting in the cafe, Clara and Owen celebrated their silver wedding anniversary with a party that filled their home and spilled into the yard. Margaret and Daniel were there, engaged now and planning their own wedding. Sarah came with her husband, a professor she had met at one of Clara's university events. Old friends and colleagues mixed with new ones, creating a tapestry of the life they had built together. At one point in the evening, Clara found herself standing alone for a moment, watching Owen hold court with a group that included both pharmaceutical researchers and design students. He was in his element, passionate and engaged, still the same man who had taken a chance on a woman who spilled coffee on him. "You two are relationship goals," one of her students said, coming up beside her. "The way you look at each other, even after all these years, that's what I want someday." It took work, Clara said honestly, and bravery, and being willing to be wrong about what we thought we knew. What do you mean? Clara thought about how to explain it. I almost walked away from this because I was afraid. I had convinced myself that certain things were impossible, that I knew better than to take risks. But love requires risk. It requires vulnerability. And sometimes the things we're most afraid of are exactly what we need. The student nodded thoughtfully and wandered off, leaving Clara with her memories. She thought about that conversation in the cafe, when she had been so sure that distance would destroy them. She had been both right and wrong. The distance had been hard, painful at times, full of missed calls and lonely nights. But it hadn't destroyed them. Instead, it had forced them to build something stronger, something that could withstand the inevitable separations that came with ambitious careers and full lives. Margaret's wedding was beautiful, held in the same garden where Clara and Owen had renewed their vows. Clara cried watching her daughter marry the man she loved, seeing the same mix of joy and terror and hope in Margaret's eyes that she had felt on her own wedding day. "Another generation," Owen said, squeezing her hand as they watched the newlyweds dance. "Another love story. Think they'll make it, if they're willing to be as brave as we were." "Absolutely." 2 years later, Margaret gave birth to twin boys, and Clara and Owen became grandparents. Holding those tiny babies, Clara felt the circle of their life completing in the most beautiful way. They had built this family, this legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. Owen retired first, at 65, finally ready to step away from the company he had built. Clara followed a few years later, finishing one last semester of teaching before handing off her classes to a younger professor. They sold their house in Chicago and bought a smaller place in Portland, coming full circle to where their story had begun. The cafe where they had met was still there, now run by the original owner's daughter. Clara and Owen went there every week, sitting in their old booth, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing, just like they always had. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked one morning, watching rain streak down the window. "Spending your life with someone who almost pushed you away?" "Not even for a second," Owen said immediately. "You were worth the wait, Clara, worth every challenge, every obstacle, every moment of doubt." "I would do it all again exactly the same way. Even the long distance, especially the long distance. It taught us how to really communicate, how to be intentional about loving each other. I think we might have taken each other for granted if it had been too easy at the start." Clara reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers finding the familiar calluses from his years of lab work. They were both older now, silver-haired and laugh-lined, but the connection between them was as strong as ever. "I was so wrong about distance," she said softly. "I thought physical separation would tear us apart. I didn't understand that real connection has nothing to do with geography. That love isn't about how many hours you spend in the same room, but about how you show up for each other even when you're apart. You weren't wrong to be cautious. Long distance is hard. It requires work and commitment and trust. But it made us stronger. It did. We built our relationship on communication and intention rather than convenience and proximity. And when we finally got to be together, we knew exactly what we had because we had fought so hard for it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Portland wake up around them. This city where they had met, where they had almost lost each other, where they had come back to spend their golden years together. Margaret visited with the twins, now toddlers who filled the house with chaos and laughter. Daniel had gotten a position at a Portland hospital, and they had decided to move west to be closer to Clara and Owen. It was a gift Clara hadn't expected, having her daughter and grandchildren nearby for this phase of life. History repeating itself, Owen joked as they watched Margaret chase the twins around the backyard. Another family in Portland. But they spent years on the East Coast first, building their own story, their own strength, just like we did. Clara and Owen traveled in their retirement, visiting all the places they had always talked about but never had time for. They went to Greece and walked through ancient ruins, to Japan during cherry blossom season, to New Zealand where they hiked through landscapes that took Clara's breath away. But they always came back to Portland, to their little house and their weekly cafe visits and their family. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and friends who had become family over the decades, Clara stood to make a toast. 50 years ago, I married my best friend, she began, her voice still strong despite her age. But our story actually started 53 years ago in a cafe not far from here, when I spilled coffee on a stranger and he laughed instead of getting angry. That stranger became the love of my life, but not without challenges, not without fear and doubt and obstacles that seemed insurmountable. She looked at Owen, who was watching her with the same love in his eyes that she had seen on their wedding day, on the day Margaret was born, on 1,000 ordinary mornings over coffee. I almost let him go, Clara continued. I was so afraid of distance, so convinced that physical separation would destroy what we had, that I was willing to walk away rather than risk the pain of trying and failing. But Owen taught me that love isn't about being in the same place. It's about choosing each other every single day, no matter how many miles are between you. The distance we feared would break us actually made us stronger. It taught us to communicate, to trust, to be intentional about our love. And every challenge we've faced since has been easier because we learned those lessons early. She raised her glass. To my husband, who was patient enough to wait for me to be brave, to the distance that taught us how to really love each other, and to 50 years of choosing each other every single day. Everyone raised their glasses, and Clara sat back down beside Owen, who took her hand and held it tightly. "Thank you," he said quietly, just for her, "for taking the risk, for moving to Chicago, for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for not giving up on me when I was too scared to try." They kissed to applause and laughter, and Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. All the miles traveled, all the phone calls and video chats and stolen weekends, the moves and the changes and the growth. The fear she had overcome and the love she had chosen. She had warned him she couldn't do long distance. She had been so certain it would destroy them. But she had been wrong in the most beautiful way possible. The distance hadn't destroyed them. It had refined them, tested them, proved that what they had was strong enough to survive anything. And in the end, the miles between them had mattered far less than the love that bridged them. They had been apart for such a short time in the grand scheme of their lives together, but those months and years of navigating distance had given them tools they used every day. Communication, trust, intentionality. The ability to choose each other actively rather than passively staying together out of convenience. Clara looked around at the celebration, at the family they had created and the life they had built, and felt nothing but gratitude. For the coffee she had spilled all those years ago. For Owen's laugh and his patience and his unwavering love. For her own courage in eventually choosing to take a risk on something that terrified her. The distance had made them stronger. And that strength had carried them through 50 years of marriage, through every challenge and joy and ordinary moment that made up a life well lived together. As the party continued around them, Clara leaned her head on Owen's shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beside her. They were home, not because of the city they lived in or the house they owned, but because they had each other. And that had been true across every mile, through every challenge from that very first day. The distance had been their crucible, and they had emerged from it stronger, surer, ready to build a love that would last a lifetime.